when you say you're making a Western, right? Everyone has a habit. Even if you ask your friends to give you a line from a Western, everyone slows down like 75% of the talk. So it could be like, hey boy, get off that horse. The person doing it, because it's a Western, they go, hey boy, get off that horse.
Aleem, I read this is actually your first feature that you wrote. Like I mean, you don't have like 14 feature scripts in a drawer, is that?
No, it's the first one. It took long enough though. It took 5.5 years to write, so maybe I could have written 14 scripts in that time, but yeah.
Wow. But in that time, I understand you spent like a decade graduating through short films, commercials, and theatre. Can you talk about, I guess, how those experiences informed your ability to kind of walk onto the set and make this debut feature, and particularly how you communicated with actors?
Yeah, I mean, I think every film, it's like doing it for the first time on every set. When you walk on set, it feels like it's the first time. And there's that anxiety of like, do I know what I'm doing? But as you said, I did have made shorts, and I've worked in various kind of capacities in the industry. And I think for me, working in kind of directing theatre gave me a real respect for the source material and for script. And I'm quite protective of the screenplay, especially in development and in production, because it's had the most time, I've had the most time with it. And really, it's about getting the actors and the crew and the collaborators kind of, I don't know, I want them to be on the same, I feel like I'm much further ahead because I've spent so much time with these characters, and I want the actors to meet me and then move the character even further. So yeah, really respecting the screenplay and really comes from theatre, and also rehearsing. I wish I had more time to rehearse with the actors.
What did you get?
Well, Joanna and I spent weeks, we had about 15 days, I think, over a number of weeks. Wow. I would have loved to have lived with her and, really just kind of live in Dover for a couple of weeks and spend that time. We did go to Dover numerous times. We spent a lot of time talking about the character. She met my mum. My mum taught her how to cook the dish in the film. My mum gave her a bag of clothes to kind of go home and live in for a week. Since
you mentioned your mum, do you want to just explain, I guess, the relationship that this film has to your mum, and to the extent that it has one?
Yeah, I should say the film isn't autobiographic, yeah. But my poor dad. But my mum is a white Muslim convert, and she's been with my father since they were teenagers. Mm-hmm. So although the story isn't autobiographic, the characters are very close to home, and Mary especially is very much inspired by my mum.
There's a lot of silence that you let play out in the film, and can you talk about your approach to the power of understatement that seems to be present in the film?
I think there's I wanted to reach or find this kind of duality in the sound design. I think we rarely get to see characters on screen just being mundane. And I think it's in those moments of mundanity, when someone's ironing a shirt or making a cup of tea, putting the washing out, there's kind of like a duality in that the body is doing something physically, but the mind is often somewhere else, like when we're driving a car. And there's something about that really spoke to the essence of what the film is kind of exploring in some ways. And I think that's when we can see characters the most deeply, the most kind of sincerely and clearly when they are in that space. I mean, the film is dealing with themes about identity and the masks and the layers that we wear and who gets to see us when. And I wanted Mary to have space to, also as a Muslim character, to just be mundane and for us to kind of fully see her inhabiting her world as a normal person. The way we often see these sorts of characters, well, we rarely get to see characters like Mary in the first place, but when we do, it's a bit cliche. And I don't know, I wanted to see that beauty that she kind of inhabited naturally in her home.
Rebecca, I know that you always get asked this question, about your creative choice to make your film in black and white, but I'd like you to just talk about that and, and I guess why you felt that for this material it was the appropriate creative solution.
I can talk to that. I think it was conveniently sort of it was both practical and metaphorical. You know, at first, the metaphorical I can speak to first because it's not really what you expect. I think it's to do with, you know, at first blush, it looks like I'm being really literal. You know, this is a black and white world, therefore this is a black and white film. And actually what it's about is you thinking about your perception of that literalness, because nothing is black and white. People can't be reduced to one single categories, and the more we try and limit and do that, it doesn't really work. We invariably spill out of it, and you know, no one is literally black and white, and nor is black and white film. It's 1,000 shades of grey, which is actually what the film's really about. So there's a sort of nice poetry there, but it's also practical because it allowed me to cast 2 black women, and even, you know, a step further than that, 2 women that are culturally perceived as identifying as black, because then I think you've got a place from which to destabilize that understanding and that perception and mess with it, basically. And I can only do that in black and white because it creates its own world. So in essence, the world becomes mutable, like, you know, a scene at the beginning with John is very whitewashed because it's a white world, and it's oppressively white because he's the one with the power, so he gets to dictate the context from which we see these women. And then as they move into different spaces, you can shift and play with lighting states. And, you know, that constantly keeps you in a perspective that is, you know, the metaphor that the best metaphor that I can think of is not metaphor, but analogy rather. You know, if you're a family member in a black family and someone crosses the color line and lives their life as white, you don't look at them and go, oh yes, they look convincingly white, I'm not worried about them. You only ever think of them as black. And that's the perspective that I wanted the audience to sit in. And I could only really achieve that in black and white.
You alluded to it there, but we also saw it in the clip that everybody's passing. Can you elaborate on that and how that kind of, I guess, how you relate to that personally as well?
Yeah, that was my very sort of on the nose line to sort of point out what the book does probably much more elegantly than me saying that. It's, you know, it's a real little onion of a book. It's only 93 pages, and yet in its simplicity, it contains worlds. And the sort of big red herring about it, and I think the sort of turn is that it says that it's about this woman who's hiding her racial identity, but then as you get further into it, you realize it's actually about the other one who's not hiding her racial identity, but is arguably hiding everything else about herself. And it touches on, you know, a possible repressed homosexuality, a dissatisfaction with being a mother, a dissatisfaction with being a wife, dissatisfaction with being, you know, the right kind of member of the Black community in a slightly sort of bourgeois, middle class sort of setting, and the performance of that, the performance of societal appropriateness. And it's, and I think those are all things that haven't really been touched on before in a sort of period drama about people of color in some way. And this was written in 1929, you know, and that's very sort of astonishing, because now we have terms like intersectionality that describe all the things I'm talking about. And she didn't then. But, you know, I think I'm waffling and I'm aware that I've got to keep it short. It's really ultimately about freedom to be who you want to be. And I think that's the sort of crux of it, is that everyone is operating under different systems of oppression. So there are different degrees of that freedom, but we all struggle with this sense of, who do I want to be? And is who I want to be a free choice? And then how do I project it? You know, where's the sort of crunch point between the story you tell about yourself and the one society tells about you?
I'm sure everyone in the audience knows that this began its life as a short of the same name, also starring Stephen Graham, which is, what, 22 minutes, something like that?
22 minutes, yeah.
Oh, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And which was also shot in one continuous take. Now, I'm sure every interview that you do, you talk about that, but I do think it's such a it's such a key creative choice in terms of the film. I think it is appropriate to ask you about that, and I guess what inspired you and why you felt for this story it was the right creative choice.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it was Matthew Lewis, my cinematographer with the short film. I'd talked to him about the idea, and James and I had sort of written this basic outline for what we wanted for the short, and I was like, I want it to feel real and like you're there with the kitchen staff and everybody, and so I want it to be erratic and overlapping dialogue and all this kind of stuff, and he just said, why don't we do it in one take? And I was just like, okay, yeah. And then I just thought that obviously the seed was planted, and I was like, wow, this is And so I'd seen movies like Victoria and Russian Ark and those movies, so I knew it could be done. So that was quite an easy decision. Then after that, we went into it with that, and we wrote the script with a location in mind, and with that in mind as well. So the script was written very much in the perspective of the camera, right? And then, but I didn't want it to come across as like a look how clever we are, because I wanted it to create an extra layer of tension and to give the audience that feeling of what it's like to be in that environment. And for it to be almost like a second thought, because when you're in that, anyone who's ever worked in hospitality, whether it be in the kitchen or out front or whatever, as soon as the doors open to the moment they close, you don't get a chance to stop. Like you've got to be on this, everybody's on the same path to leading to the sort of end when you can chill and have a drink or whatever. But it's one take. It's you don't get a chance to go and let's just stop for a minute and do this, or let's cut forward 10 minutes or whatever. So that was what we wanted to create from it, really. Yeah.
And despite the kind of I'm imagining the production, what that imposes on the production in terms of the incredibly tight choreography that you need to tell your story, you guys were also able to kind of create freedom for the actors. So maybe Jeymes, you could speak to this, like your approach to script and storytelling, and how you, I guess, work with actors, where the improvisation comes in. Does it happen in rehearsal? Does it happen on screen? Both. Please speak to that.
Yeah, so it was sort of a kind of a circular process of Phil and I would write the script. We did kind of a hybrid between dialogue and improvisation, where we kind of wrote these paragraphs that included all the information that any of our cast needed, whether it was the content of what they were saying, or the emotions, or how we move through topics and things like this. And so we would kind of act things out on the call together and work out how things are going to feel without necessarily putting the dialogue down. And then when we got to set, we did 2 weeks of rehearsals, or about 10 days, where we took that...
Not enough time.
Not enough time, yeah. We could have done a bit more.
Yeah.
Where we talked through those scenes with the actor, or Phil mostly as director, and I would kind of sit in the corner like a little spider, kind of making notes. But we would rework the script based on what people were improvising. So people would bring all sorts of new perspectives to their characters, the way they would joke, the way they would deliver lines, and we would finesse that into the script, rework the script, because in the end it needed to be quite choreographed and quite to the note, so people knew what their cues were. So it was sort of a bouncing process between what we had written, what we were improvising, and then what we needed to settle on for the film to work and for it to feel like a tight, cinematic experience.
Yeah.
Hester, I was going to come to you next, and I mean, this is your day. I mean, my understanding is you're an actor. You've been producing shorts for quite a long time. This is your debut feature as a producer.
Yeah.
Quite a producerial challenge, I would say. So, I mean, I guess what were the biggest challenges, and also could you talk about the four separate takes and how that flowed, and I should explain that because of the COVID pandemic, you called time.
Yeah,
after the fourth.
Yeah, So we were going to do 8 takes over 4 nights. And COVID it was coming at us, and we didn't quite know what this thing was. We got to a point where we were losing cast members, we were losing essays, were just kind of walking off set. We lost key camera team. We were replacing as fast as we could possibly replace.
Crazy.
And I was speaking to Bart, my fellow producer, and we were saying, right, it's just not, we're not going to be able to do it for too much longer. And every day he would come up to me like, this has been shut down, they've shut down stadiums, they've shut down all of these other film sets all around. I think we were the only film set going, and we were like, heck. And so we had to make a call and say, okay, well, after Tuesday, that's it. So we actually only had 2 days. And so they had the weekend in between as well. So they had about 4.5 days rehearsal with Stephen and the whole cast. Then we had the weekend, and then after the weekend, everyone was a little bit rusty. So the first 2 takes really were also rehearsal, I'd say, and then I think there was a slight issue with the camera on one of them.
Yeah.
Were you slightly panicking, thinking, I've only got 1 more day?
Well, no, I didn't know this at the time. So I had 6 more goes in my head. So after the first day, I was like, great, we've got 6 more. They were rubbish. Let's just, yeah. And then that night, Hester and Bart called me and were like, so tomorrow, let's talk about tomorrow. It's going to have to be the last day.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, but we didn't tell people.
We didn't really tell everybody, no.
No, we didn't.
Because you thought that would put too much pressure on the actors, wouldn't be helpful to the actors.
We didn't tell everyone. We told some people.
We told some people, yeah. Stephen knew.
But, yeah.
But Stephen had a bet already.
Oh.
Saying it was going to be the 3rd take.
He actually came up to us and said, this is the one.
It wasn't Kobe, was it?
This is the one. This will be.
So you made the extended short film They Die by Dawn in 2013, I believe, or certainly it was released then, which was also a Western. And I wondered what the learnings were from making that film that, enabled you to step up into what is, after all, a pretty extraordinarily ambitious debut feature.
Thank you, brother. And hey, everyone. I wrote my short film They Die by Dawn in 2010. I shot it in April 2012, right? And we released it 2013. And it was like a proof of concept, right? But not necessarily not to me, or not even to, well, it was more like a proof of concept to all of the people I speak to, telling them that black people existed in the Old West, right? Black people existed, like 1 in 4 cowboys was black. And I love Westerns, right? I love them. But like women have just been erased from that entire genre. I'll get to your question in a second. They've been erased from that entire genre. If you think how dope, like I love Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood movie, that every single female character in it is a prostitute. Whether you were white, black, Johnny Guitar, John Crawford, but it's still like submissive to some weak male plot. So for me, They Die by Dawn was like a shotgun blast, like, look, we existed, right? And it was the short for this big one. I think what I learned most from it is really strange things, like a lot of actors are allergic to horses. I wouldn't have even thought that. Ain't that a crazy thing? I'm allergic to dogs. When you get around on horse, they're like Idris is super allergic to horses. So I learned that on They Die by Dawn. I also learned that like sometimes when actors say they can ride horses. Like I've never seen Michael K. Williams, right? One of my best friends on the planet, God rest his soul, man. He told me, yo, James, I had his stunt double there. I was ready. I shot They Die by Dawn in 4 days. It's a 50-minute movie, 4 days, right? And Michael was like, yo, James, man, you can't let the stunt man ride my horse. I want to ride. Could you ride? I could ride. I'm not insured, Michael. Sag, I'll get in trouble. I'm just some dude from the hood in London. Like, I'm not insured. I won't tell him. You won't tell. And then so he got on a horse, and I saw a horse do this. I've never seen a horse do this in my life entire. He got on a horse, I said, action. Now he's meant to come forward. I said, action. The horse does this. Off camera. Like, Michael, what the hell? Get off the horse and let the stuntman. No, I gotta do it. And I lost half a day. A 4-day shoot, half a day, sunlight. So it was more that kind of stuff. And things like and this helped me a lot going into the Harder They Fall. Things like you know, people when you say you're making a Western, right? People, just everyone has a habit. Even if you ask your friends to give you a line from a Western, everyone slows down like 75% of the talk. So it could be like, hey boy, get off that horse. The person doing it, because it's a Western, they're like, hey boy, get off that horse. I'm like, man, look, what's all the slow talking for? And like in Day Down by Dawn, everyone talks slow. And I was like, no, come the Harder They Fall, pace. And the reason being is because the two most famous cowboys is John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. And they talk slow. But if you look at the other characters, in those same movies, they're speaking fast. The only reason John Wayne and Clint Eastwood spoke so slow is because that's how they speak in real life. That's how he talks in interviews. And John Wayne, you can see, you know, God bless John Wayne, but you can see he speaks like a person that hasn't got many black friends. You know what I'm saying? And that's just the way they are. But it's almost like it's hypnotized the entire world because everyone thinks like okay, we're making a Western. It's slow talking time. So I made sure, even though I had like some powerhouse actors in They Die by Dawn, and they taught me so much. But going into The Harder They Fall, I made sure like I wanted pace, because the further you go back in time, if you listen to like old school recordings, the further you go back in time, the faster people spoke, not only in cinema but in real life. Even if you look at those old English movies, like Look Back in Anger, like, I love you, Ade. I love you, Ade. Come down here, Dave. I will come down. Like everything was faster back then. So but I wanted it like I am sweet. You ain't sweet. I am sweet. I wanted it to feel how we feel today, and that was my, you know, so alert allergies to horses and slow talking.
Posy, if I can start with you, what was it about? Should I call the musician Glenn? Yeah, Glenn. That captivated you, and talk about the, you know, the friendship that sparked, and road tripping across Canada, and at what point you realised this is a film.
Yeah, I mean, the music was what got me, which I think anyone that hears that record, Keyboard Fantasies, I don't know what it is, but you hear it and you're just like, oof, this is something that's like, it's like coming home to music. So yeah, I heard that record, a friend played it to me, and then I was like digging around on the internet trying to find more music and couldn't find any. And then eventually found my way to Glenn. So Glenn was born Beverly Glenn Copeland, but transitioned in the early 90s. And he'd been making music all along, but not many people kind of knew where he was. And I reached out initially because I was researching another film project about music. So I reached...
A feature? Or?
It was like it was a feature that never got made, that a friend of mine were making together. But yeah, so I reached out about that. He was like, found him on Facebook. He's like, yeah, I'd love to speak. And we got on Skype and we spoke for like 2.5 hours. And it was like the most beautiful conversation. And he started telling me all this stuff about his kind of theories about why his music had come into its own now. And then, yeah, I wanted to make some work with him. We kept talking on Skype for like a year. And I was kind of, what I wanted to do in the beginning was just make a music video with him, because he'd never played that record live before. He wrote it completely on his own with 2 synths and recorded it himself. So it had never been played live. And I think because his voice is so stunning, I was like, I just want to connect the music to the voice to the person. So that was all I wanted. And I wrote like a little short called Elders and kind of went around to a bunch of people asking if they'd give me like £2,000 to go and do it. And no one would. And people were just like, old person, no one's going to be interested, literally, which I was kind of shocked by.
But it was just about Glenn, the show.
Yeah, it was just about Glenn at that time. And it was funny because at that time as well, Glenn was kind of the record wasn't taking off quite as much as it is now, obviously. And Glenn was kind of wanting to record new music, and we were having all these conversations. It was super open. And then about a year in, I was going to make a really bad online commercial for a gaming company, and it cancelled last minute, and they gave me like a cancellation fee. So I had a week off, and I was like, I'm just going. So I just got on a plane to Nova Scotia.
You went together?
I went on my own.
Couldn't afford to go together.
Yeah.
Literally one flight only.
Like went on my own over, found a DP over there, and went and drove many hours to find Glenn, and like knocked on his door of the shed that he has the studio in, and I've been speaking to him on Skype for like a year, but still I was like driving through Nova Scotia on my own in this rental car, you know, and you have that moment and you're like, what the hell am I doing? And then like went up to his shed and knocked on the door, and he opened, and it was like, oh, it's like, yeah, it's like coming home.
So Liv, you already had your company with Posy at this time, Luca? Is that...
Yeah, it was set up in 2014 by Posy and another mate, and then I joined in 2016.
So what what was the journey for you as a producer? Like, you know, financing this. At what point how much did you have to already show before you could get any money? I think you had Kickstarter involved.
Yeah, so it was like super unconventional, this film, in that we actually didn't really set out to make a feature at all. All we wanted to do was, like Posy was saying, commit Glenn's music to camera, because it had just gone unrecorded for so long. No one had really seen him like perform this music live ever. So Posy flew out to Nova Scotia. We shot this stuff. She came back. She basically filled me in on like Glenn's life story that he'd shared with her, and I just said, like, we have to do this. Like, this is it. You know, we'd been waiting for a project like this to land. And the more you hear about Glenn's story, the more you just want to know more and more and more. So we then set off on this journey to find the money, which basically involved a Kickstarter campaign initially, which we, you know, wrote up a huge Kickstarter page, which was essentially our treatment and our proof of concept. Managed to make that money, which basically funded us to go on tour with Glenn and the band. So we took Posy's mum's car, a DP, a soundie, and got the ferry to France, and then basically followed them through like France and Belgium for 5 days. Didn't sleep for 5 days. It was literally shoot every waking hour, come back, dump the rushes, 2 hours sleep, wake up at the crack of dawn, go to the next one. And that was like the bulk of our filming for the project, really. It was that week on the road with them in Europe. So it was like completely wild. And then we came back and we'd run out of money. So we managed to get this incredible arts grant with Lush, the bath bomb people, who had this like 250 grand a year film fund that they divvied up. So we got totally hands-off cash, no commissioners, no editorial, anything. It was, you know, why this film looks the way it does is because we just had total freedom to make it how we wanted to.